Hey everybody, I know it's been a while, but we are starting the next project here, which is taking this old salvaged case, which we sucked all the glass out of, and this one had the EVGA X99 board in it that, of course, we found to be dead. We're going to go ahead and transform this with a ASRock X570 socket AM4, and we're putting a Ryzen 5 in it. 5000 series. So everything's actually cleaned up. Unfortunately, this case is probably always going to be a little dented, but the good news is we've got fans and stuff in here, which should make it pretty nice. And of course, we've got the CPU liquid cooler that will mount to the top. So let's go ahead and get this thing started. Let's get the board in here and start plugging in components. Okay, so again, this is an all dumpster find. I actually found this ASRock in the box, complete, in a, well, not a dumpster, but a large bin of discarded electronics. And wouldn't you know it, as we've seen before, it's a complete board. Everything is real nice. And we've got really everything we need here to make a very nice PC. This one should actually be pretty well, it looks like, to me, it looks like it's going to be pretty well competitive with current gen stuff. So of all the components that I see in here, it's just the board. There's no backing plate. So the existing backing plate, I'm going to guess, isn't going to match perfectly. So we're just going to go ahead and take that out, because I have a sneaking suspicion that may have been what shorted the old board. But no matter, don't need it. I'll hang on to it in case for some reason I ever replace that EVGA board. But for now, I think everything here looks great. The board should match up basically the same way. It's the same style motherboard. So I shouldn't have to change any standoffs as far as I can tell, or maybe make some minor adjustments. But yeah, it's going to sit in there just fine. This one has quite a bit of good onboard stuff. I'm just going to check. Okay, well, that answers that question. So we are going to actually have to change some standoffs here to get this board to match up real nice. It does look like it has M2 capability, which is pretty cool. I don't have any boards that have that right now, so this will be a first for me. I'm not familiar with M2 tech, so another thing to learn. That's the great thing about dumpster finds, is you can always find stuff that might surprise you and might give you something really interesting to work with. So I'm going to change my standoffs and we'll pick it up after that. Alright, so I was able to get the standoffs in the right place there. Really didn't take a whole lot of adjustment. They were actually closer than I thought. So we're just screwing things in. I did plug in the audio because it kept getting in the way. And I'm avoiding using my magnetic screwdriver just in case. You know, brand new board, probably the most I guess modern board that I own currently. I don't think even my main PC doesn't have M2, so you may be laughing at that, but I gotta be honest, I'm a novice when it comes to M2 tech. I'll probably have to invest in an M2 hard drive, or it looks like this one supports 2, so I might actually might as well do 2 if everything works out. The other side to this is this case, you know, is a temporary housing at this point, just because I really want to see if everything works. If everything does work, it's probably going to be worthwhile to go ahead and, you know, get this into a good case, because it'll probably make a decent gaming PC, really. Now, it would handle up to a Ryzen 9 5950X, and of course, me not looking at what I'm doing, just dropped a screw. So we're going to do the magnetic just to get it out of there. I thought about getting that board, or excuse me, that CPU for this system. I opted not to because those are still fairly expensive, and there's not a whole lot of performance drop-off to this particular Ryzen 5 we're putting in it based on benchmarks. So, you know, I figure why spend the extra money right now? I don't even know if the board works. If it does work, I'll get plenty of performance out of that Ryzen 5, and if it doesn't, well, you know, it's still a free motherboard, and I can always find another one to suit the Ryzen 5. Now hopefully our power cable here will make the gap. It might be a little tight, but I think I can get it to work if I can just get a hair more leeway from this. And of course it wants to keep splitting the fours here. So the fun part about wiring these up is with these back of case cable management systems, everything always seems a little too stretched for my liking. I prefer to have a little extra give, and that's nice when you're going over the top, like in classic systems. Honestly, just because, you know, you don't have to worry about slack really, and if you don't have enough slack, you probably have the wrong power supply. But everything on this board seems to be a little more conveniently placed versus that X99. So that to me is a bonus. I think this is definitely a better board, at least for that function of it. I'm sure somebody can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I don't know. The cool thing about motherboards these days is honestly they're all fairly similar, so I think you're getting a good product by and large no matter what you're getting. So that's, again, my opinion. Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just modern technology stupid, but you know, at least I'm honest. That being said, I want to make sure our keys are going in here correctly. The trouble about this is because I had to split it apart to get it in and out of that old EVGA board, now it's not wanting to go in together, and the 4-pin is not wanting to sink in after the 20-pin. So that's just kind of an irritating thing, but I don't think it's, you know, not insurmountable, of course. There we go. The other thing was the power supply in here was suspect when we were trying to fire up that EVGA. So I'm hoping that's not going to be a problem, but again, also not going to hold my breath. I do think it's interesting that this one is equipped with a bunch of SATA, and it's got M2. That to me is neat because it allows to communicate backwards. I don't think there's an IDE controller on here, probably for good reason. Most people don't need them, and I'm sure there's probably end users out there that's never used an IDE connector. That being said, I think everybody should have to use IDE to respect their roots, but at the same time, well, let's be honest, IDE was never great nor perfect. And I am wondering here if this connector is actually going to go. It looks like it's got an adapter on it, so let's pull this. There we go. Yeah, that's right. This EVGA board had a riser because of the configuration of the board, and being able to get the USB in there was basically impossible. But there we go. It's a little bit goofy, but well, whatever. No skin off my nose either way. I think that's all the way in. A little tough to tell, but if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Okay, so I think it's just mounting some fan connectors now. We got a chassis fan, and the center fan, and then the lower fan is actually powered off of the Molex on the power supply. So let's see. I'm going to find another fan bay for it. Boy, that Might actually be an issue the way those wires are routed, but luckily, once again, not a deal breaker. We can just jimmy that wire out and extend it a little farther across the case and basically find the power source on the board a lot easier. You know, that's the other thing about working on computers for as many years as I have. For better or worse, I guess, you kind of figure out the ins and outs of kind of how to get everything going. I think actually this one looks like it might also be powered by Molex, which would be kind of handy, but I don't know that for sure. So just in case, I'm going to hook it up to board power, which, you know, cable management snobs out there, I'm sorry. I promise one of these days I'm going to do a whole video on just good old-fashioned cable management and being a good steward of your cables. But at the end of the day, if I'm telling the truth, I really don't care. Okay, so these are going to be for our video, and I'll hook up the power switches. That's not all that interesting. So let's grab our RAM sticks, get those loaded, and then we'll do our video card, and then we'll drop in our processor and go ahead and mount that cooling unit, which I think we'll probably have to take the mounts here. This is for, I believe, an AMD fan, which ironically the processor did come with, but I'd rather use a liquid cooler because, you know, for this is more of a gaming type PC, it's probably going to see some heavy use, and just to extend the life of it, let's go ahead and use the liquid cooler we have on hand. All right, so again, this board's going to have an MSI GTX 970, which may be dated for this board, I guess. I don't know for sure, but, you know, whatever. It's a dumpster find on a dumpster find on a dumpster find. And I don't know, this connector is a little odd to me. I'm not familiar with the way they build things now, so my apologies for being an old fart. But whatever. Again, I guess I don't care. So we'll sink a couple of screws in there to get that secured, powered up, and then I think what we're going to do, just because we have kind of the convenience of the existing cooling mount, is we may test it without the liquid cooler. I'm going to think on that, and we'll do the next segment here in just a second. All right, so ironically, the liquid cooler itself answered the question for me. It's only going to fit that EVGA board because it's an EVGA branded cooler. So, oh well. Just means if I come across another EVGA board that it'll fit, we'll be using it down the road. It's a nice cooler, so no love lost there, I guess. And that's a good processor sitting in that old board too, so totally fine with that. And again, I haven't necessarily given up hope that I didn't overlook some way to possibly fix that old board. And in which case, you can always find another Junkyard case to go with it. So you might be asking yourself, why use all these Junkyard parts? Why not just go out and buy the components and build a proper machine? Well, one is expense, of course. Stuff's not cheap, and that's basically it. But beyond that, I'm not like a power user. I'm not a gamer. I do some streaming and, of course, record podcasts. But for my purposes, I don't need a super powerful gaming PC. It's just not something I need right now. And it's more fun for me, actually, to, well, quite frankly, rebuild old stuff and see if I can get it to work. That being said, I'm not opposed to having some super system either, but I've got a pretty powerful system for at least what I use it for. I did this week play a little Diablo 4. If you guys are fans of the Diablo franchise, highly recommend it. I've actually never played any of the Diablo games. I was always a StarCraft guy. But for basically a complete novice at the game, I really enjoyed it. And I would definitely recommend it. So In there, we've got our Ryzen 5 5600X. Again, this one I chose because it was the least expensive compatible processor for this board, with very similar performance ratings to the highest end Ryzen 9 that I could put in this board to get it working. Now the board is a little dated, but the Ryzen 9 that it would work with is actually fairly powerful and would probably make this maybe even a high-end gaming system. So that was a plus for me. Now it looks like this comes pre-greased, boy, with contact cooling material. So I won't even have to use my thermal paste on this, which is nice. That is actually a big plus. The only thing is I will have to remove these 4 screws to these mounts here. That must be for a more traditional fan, I assume. Couldn't tell you necessarily, but it could just be a protector for the board or for the socket, I guess, maybe. Either way, we'll get that on out of here and then mount our cooler. I do think it's rather novel that it comes pre-greased, so you don't have to put your own thermal paste on there. I'm sure power users or end users who are, demanding a little bit more of their boards probably use fancier thermal paste. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I remember an era where there was no such thing as a processor cooling fan, where you were running a Pentium system and didn't really matter how hot it got because, well, honestly, all it really was a processor and a socket. As long as the processor was running, it got hot, and then it cooled down when you shut the computer off. And that's why I think a lot of older folks who use computers do the shutdown, even though I think everybody these days will tell you never to shut your computer down to stay current on updates and whatnot. I know I keep mine on all the time that I use regularly, but any of the other systems I don't bother with that. They're not really all that important. I will say, working through the honeycomb of this case to try and get these screws out without damaging anything has been kind of a bear and kind of annoying. I will say that this lovely design has a backing plate that I realize now I'm going to have to hold as I re-screw this. Let's go ahead and lift that up and get that punch back up into place here. There we go. That is one major beef I have with the designs of this board, because you see it's going to have to mount like that. So to do that without having my hand physically underneath, I'm going to have to shuffle a few things around and basically just shove something up underneath this board to try and hold both of those up and in place. Luckily, in my workspace here, I've got plenty of stuff. You could potentially just sink a screw back in there just to hold it, but there we go. It's wedged in enough. I'm not too worried about that. I'm actually just going to grab a little bit rather than use my magnetic one over here, just in case my hand like that slips. I don't want it to magnetize the processor. Although, again, I didn't spend all that much money on it, but no sense in pissing away a couple $100 or however much this was. I don't actually remember, for nothing. All right, so this should just mount comfortably. Whoops. Don't do that. But hey, I keep all my flaws in here so you guys can learn from my mistakes. At least that's what I tell myself to make myself feel better about dropping stuff, magnetizing sticks of RAM, all that good stuff. Now I'm going to go ahead and slip that bit into my screwdriver here. Doesn't quite fit this particular screwdriver because my fingers are a little too large to reach down in there. and tighten this with just the dials. I will say it's kind of convenient here, the design of this. I would have liked to have it turned the other way, but the RAM was in the way, which I could take the heat sink off that stick of RAM, but kind of would rather have it on. No matter though. And I'll just get this slipped in here. All right. Yeah, I will say it's a pretty slick thing to get a cooling fan with a processor. I was astounded by how many modern processors come without cooling fans or any kind of cooling module. I assume that's because so many folks use liquid coolers today. You know, I don't mean to sound like an old man. I'm not that old, but back in my day, we didn't all have liquid coolers. As a matter of fact, a liquid cooler back in the day was extremely unusual. I don't know that I've seen more than one or two ever that was running a liquid cooler outside of the ones that I've shown on the channel here. So yeah, I mean, I'm just being honest with you guys, that was something that truthfully, I mean, you were a very heavy power user, and to be quite honest, I don't think was really even necessary for the processors that were common, even for most gaming machines back then. So I don't think I'm getting any bite when I'm screwing this down. So I'm just going to check the mount here and just see. Feels like that's in place. I don't seem to be getting any tighter, but maybe I stopped too short on both of these. That's always a possibility. I do get a little sick of these spring-loaded screws because they do have a lot of pushback. I should have done this in kind of a bolt pattern style, which I normally do, just to avoid any issues, you know, like dropping your Phillips bit. This Phillips bit actually has seen quite the ride. It's built many computers with me, and that's honestly the only reason why I keep using it. The screwdriver it came out of has been used so many times. It was a 15-in-1 I got at a Harbor Freight, gosh, 2008, when I built my command center, actually. And that was, you know, the screwdriver that started up my real passion in custom build computers, and, you know, lasted me a good long while. So, all right. Everything is mounted. Just have to hook up power and switches. And we're going to go ahead and explore this more in a part 2 video. Again, sorry about the lack of content lately. We've had a lot going on, but if you did enjoy this, and if you're looking forward to seeing whether or not this ASRock machine will get to work, make sure you hit that subscribe button, drop a like and a comment. Let me know what you think. Let me know if I'm doing anything wrong or any other comments. Call me an old man if you want, but appreciate you guys watching nonetheless. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.